Jennifer, remember the time when I met Paul at the hospital where I worked as a nurse. He was a young doctor who had just completed a medical internship, and he seemed so full of questions and desires to learn. I helped him, answered his endless questions, and at some point there was a connection between us that I couldn't ignore. Despite the age difference, our intimacy deepened every day, and soon we started dating. After 2 years of our relationship, we got married. Our first years of marriage were full of happiness and mutual understanding. But over time, I noticed a change in Paul's behavior. He began to express displeasure about our age difference and make offensive remarks about me. He said that I looked too old and that it would be better for him to marry a younger woman. His words hurt me, but I tried not to pay attention to it, hoping that it was just temporary difficulties. However, Paul not only talked, but also started flirting with the young nurses right in front of my eyes. He laughed and joked with them, and I felt more and more lonely and unnecessary. The culmination was his confession of treason. Paul was dating one of the former patients, a young woman who was 10 years younger than me. He did not even try to hide his pleasure from this affair and openly said that she was expecting a child from him. It was said with such ease and nonchalance, as if he hadn't done anything wrong. My patience has run out. I couldn't stay with a man who didn't respect me and our marriage anymore. I announced my divorce and intention to claim alimony, which caused Paul a storm of indignation. He claimed that he deserved a reward for having endured me for so many years, and that I didn't deserve anything. Even his father tried to justify his behavior by saying that it was natural for young men to look for young women. I turned to a lawyer to start the divorce process and discuss alimony issues. All these years, full of care and support on my part, turned into betrayal and humiliation on the part of Paul. To get away from me, but now we're meeting face to face again? His gaze was full of surprise and perhaps some discontent. It was unpleasant for me to stand in front of him, especially to see how he looked at me when I had to take care of his pregnant wife. I felt out of place, but professionalism took over. I replied calmly, "I work here as a nurse. This is my profession and my passion." While I was processing his wife's documents, Paul shifted uncomfortably from one foot to the other, clearly trying to avoid further conversation. But his wife apparently felt the tension in the air and, looking me straight in the eye, asked, "Do you know my husband?" I nodded, without going into details, and continued to do my duties. Deep down, I felt a mixture of relief and worry that our paths had crossed again. After they left, I retreated to my office to collect my thoughts. This meeting reminded me of all the difficulties I had to go through after our divorce, and how difficult it was for me to rebuild my life and career. Nevertheless, I was proud of myself for being able to stay calm and handle the situation professionally. Walking back to the house after my shift, I thought about the past and how things might have turned out differently if it hadn't been for Paul's betrayal. Now, working in this new place, I have found solace in the fact that I can do what I love and that my work benefits others. I gradually established relationships with colleagues and patients who appreciated me for my professionalism and warm attitude. I loved the sense of community and support I felt here at the new hospital. Every day, when I came to work, I reminded myself that despite all the trials, I was able to move forward and start a new life filled with meaning and purpose. To occupy yourself and distract yourself from unpleasant thoughts. I started working as a cashier, which was completely different from my previous job in the medical field. Working at the supermarket was less stressful, and it allowed me to take my mind off the painful memories of the last months in the hospital. Although I knew that this was only a temporary solution, it helped me recover mentally. My parents supported me, although they tried not to interfere in my affairs, giving me space and time for personal reflection. My mother sometimes left a cup of tea or a plate of homemade food at my door, trying to show her love and care in this way. Dad sometimes suggested walking together, during which we silently enjoyed nature. These little gestures helped me feel that, despite all the difficulties, I was not alone. Over time, while working at the supermarket, I began to communicate with colleagues and visitors, which became a kind of therapy for me. People told me about their worries, problems, and joys, which helped me take my mind off my own worries. I gradually returned to normal life, feeling the accumulated fatigue and frustration go away over time. However, it was still difficult for me to completely let go of the past. Thoughts of Paul and his new life came back from time to time, making me wonder how things could have turned out differently. I tried not to let these thoughts affect me too deeply, but sometimes it wasn't easy. Eventually, I realized that it was necessary to move forward, despite all the difficulties. The decision to work in a supermarket, although it seemed like a temporary compromise, gave me the opportunity to look at my life from a different angle and find a new meaning in it. It was important for me to remember that every day brings new opportunities, and that despite all the trials, I can find a way to personal happiness and satisfaction. But we faced certain difficulties related to our past. We both suffered infidelities and divorces, which left us with traces of distrust and unresolved emotional issues. Edward was extremely attentive and understanding, which helped me cope with my worries. We often talked about our past relationships, which helped us understand each other better and avoid mistakes that could lie in wait for us. Edward shared his experiences and feelings with me, and I learned to be more open and honest in expressing my thoughts and feelings. This new beginning was full of challenges, but also opportunities to grow and strengthen our relationship. The wedding was quiet and modest. We invited only the closest friends and family members. It was a warm and sincere day, filled with joy and hopes for the future. Our parents were happy to see us so satisfied and confident in each other's choices. Life changed after the wedding. We both continued to work. I stayed at the supermarket, where I was appreciated and respected as a long-time and responsible employee. Edward worked for a construction company, where he also held a respected position. Our cohabitation allowed us to get to know each other better and accept each other's characteristics. In our free time, we liked to walk in the park, visit cinemas, and sometimes arrange dinners for friends and family. Our relationship was filled with support and mutual understanding, which made our life together prosperous and happy. However, there were also moments when we faced challenges, especially when old memories or resentments surfaced. We had to work to prevent the past from affecting our present. But thanks to open communication and the desire to support each other, we were able to overcome these difficulties. So several years passed, each of which brought new lessons and opened up new horizons in our relationship. We learned to be better not only as spouses, but also as friends, partners who support each other in all endeavors. But the pediatrician also joined us to discuss all the details of the upcoming birth and care for the baby after birth. They informed us about all the possible risks associated with late motherhood and suggested a plan that would help minimize potential complications. It was not just ordinary medical care. They approached our situation with special attention and care. At every stage, I felt the support of Edward, who listened carefully to the doctors and asked questions in order to better understand how we can prepare together for the arrival of our child. It was a time when our relationship became even stronger, as we both invested every effort to ensure the safety and health of the expectant mother and child. We also started attending classes for expectant parents, where we learned the basics of newborn care and support methods during childbirth. These were important moments when we met other couples who were expecting a baby and, like us, were preparing for changes in their lives. Sharing experiences and advice with other parents helped us feel less isolated in our experiences. At the same time, we renovated our house, turning one of the rooms into a nursery. Edward enthusiastically took up decorating, choosing colors and furniture that would be not only beautiful, but also safe for the baby. Our parents often came to help, sharing their knowledge and experience, which made this process even more meaningful and joyful. Like all expectant parents, we sometimes felt stressed and anxious, but together we found ways to deal with these feelings. I appreciated every moment we spent together preparing for the arrival of our child. It was a time filled with hopes and dreams for the future. All our fears and doubts receded when we thought that we would soon become parents. It was a new beginning for both of us, and we were ready to welcome our baby with love and open hearts, despite all the difficulties and challenges that could await us. As one of the best, Mr. Taylor seemed to understand the situation immediately and quickly turned his attention to Paul. "Doctor, I think we should talk in private," he said in a soft but firm tone. Paul followed him, giving me a quick look full of embarrassment. Once in the room, Edward hugged me, trying to comfort me. Everything will be fine, my love, I'm here with you, no matter what. I felt the tension begin to ease, but I was still shocked by Paul's words. Edward held my hand, supporting and comforting me. Mr. Taylor returned a few minutes later, without Paul. He apologized to us for what happened. I apologize for Dr. Paul's behavior. We will take measures to ensure that this does not happen again. This is unacceptable, and I will personally make sure that your experience in our hospital will be only positive. Edward looked at Mr. Taylor, his face expressing gratitude for the quick response. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. We appreciate your care and professionalism. Mr. Taylor nodded and promised that our next visit would be under his personal supervision. After Mr. Taylor left, Edward and I decided it would be best to take a short break at a cafe near the hospital. We ordered coffee and sat holding hands, discussing how important it is to support each other in such moments. I'm so grateful that you're here, I said, looking at Edward. He smiled back. I will always be there for you, Jennifer. We are together in all this, in all the joys and trials that the future will bring us. We spent the rest of the day enjoying each other's peace and support, preparing for the new challenges and joys that awaited us. Despite the difficulties, our bond grew stronger every day, and I was grateful for every moment we spent together. I realized that despite everything that had happened, I needed to focus on the upcoming birth and the well-being of our unborn child. Edward and I decided to stay at this hospital because, despite the unpleasant incident with Paul, the institution had an excellent reputation and provided high-quality medical services. We realized that we shouldn't let one person spoil our impression of a place that could offer the best treatment and care for me and the baby. In the following weeks, we visited the hospital for regular checkups, and each time we were reminded of the warm and professional attitude of the staff. The chief obstetrician, Dr. Sandra, was especially attentive and caring. She explained in detail every aspect of the upcoming birth, calmed us down and answered all questions, which greatly reduced our anxiety. Mr. Taylor, the director of the hospital, also paid special attention to our case. He personally made sure that we feel confident and comfortable in their institution. He often came to our receptions to ask about our well-being and make sure that all our needs were met. When the time came for the birth, Edward was with me. He held my hand and supported me at every stage. The birth was successful, and we became the parents of a healthy baby. It was one of the happiest and most exciting moments in our lives. Seeing Edward holding our baby in his arms was incredibly touching and emotional. After the birth, we received a lot of support from the hospital staff. All the nurses and doctors were extremely caring and attentive, which made our stay in the hospital as comfortable and calm as possible. Mr. Taylor visited us to congratulate us on the new family member and once again assured us that the hospital will always treat us with special attention. Coming home with a baby was a new chapter in our lives. We both felt grateful that our path had led us to such a happy resolution of our trials. Despite all the difficulties we had to overcome, we were confident that we could overcome any obstacles together, strengthened by each other's love and support. When I returned home with our newborn daughter, life began to fill with new shades. Everything was new and incredibly exciting. Edward showed himself not only as a caring husband, but also as an incredibly gentle father. He could sit next to the crib for hours, watching the sleeping baby, and her every move brought him a smile and a gentle look. The first months passed in a cycle of feedings, diaper changes, and the first smiles, which filled our house with joy every time. I often found myself watching Edward as he taught his daughter little things, whether it was finger games or first words. As time passed, our daughter grew up, becoming more and more independent and exploring the world around her. Edward supported her in her every endeavor, always finding time to play and study together. I saw how important it was for him to pass on to her the values and lessons that could be useful to her in life. Our life was full of laughter, joyful moments, and new discoveries every day. And although there were difficulties sometimes, we knew that we could rely on them, as we supported each other in everything. It was our little magic, created out of love and mutual understanding. One day, walking in the park, Edward took our daughter in his arms and, pointing to a passing bird, said, "Do you see how she flies? You can also reach any heights if you try and believe in yourself." These words, simple but full of meaning, have sunk deep into my heart. I knew that together we could give her everything she needed for a happy and successful future. And so, remembering all the past, every day I feel grateful that I have such a wonderful husband and a wonderful daughter. Life is not always simple, but love and support make it bright and full. No wonder they say that family is the most important thing we have. Then for many years after that, I was approached with a matchmaking offer. "Would you be interested in meeting someone for a marriage of convenience? Sorry, we have a suitable couple for you." The person who brought up this topic was the head of the main store. I was 45 years old at the time, and I was not going to remarry, so I politely refused. However, the manager insisted that the potential partner was also 47 years old, he was divorced like me, and the reason for their divorce was infidelity, similar to my situation. It seems it happened about 20 years ago. Despite my initial refusal, I eventually agreed to the appointment. Since we were both older, we decided to meet directly, without intermediaries, when I arrived at the appointed restaurant. The matchmaking partner was already there when I entered the room, he said, suddenly stood up and knocked over a chair about. His face turned bright red. I couldn't help laughing. It was like something from a novel. "I'm Edward. Thank you for coming today. Nice to meet you." "I'm Jennifer." Maybe because of the first accident, we quickly got to know each other. I found out that Edward visited our supermarket during a business trip and fell for me at first glance. He convinced the head of the department to organize this meeting, which is interesting. The head of the department turned out to be Edward Sr. from the university. I would like to continue a serious relationship if possible. I was ready to refuse, but I found that I wanted to see him again. After 6 months of dating, we decided to get married. My parents liked Edward's character, and they were sincerely happy for us. Our life together, filled with Edward's care and attention, was truly blissful. Because my father made a donation to this hospital, if not, would you let a doctor like him run wild? The director shook his head and replied, "No, Edward, it's not because of the donation. We value each of our patients and try to provide a high level of service." Dr. Paul's behavior was completely unacceptable, and his dismissal was the only right decision, regardless of your father's contribution. I felt the tension in the room subside a little after the director's words. Edward seemed satisfied with this explanation and relaxed slightly. Despite everything that was happening, I was grateful for Edward's support and the director's honesty. This confirmed that we had made the right choice by staying in this hospital, despite the unpleasant incident. After this conversation, we decided to focus on the upcoming birth and on the health of our unborn child. Edward supported me every day, and we tried to support each other to keep calm and in a positive mood. A few weeks have passed, and the day of childbirth has arrived. Everything went smoothly, and I gave birth to a healthy baby. Edward was with me in the delivery room, and his support was invaluable. It was one of the happiest moments of our lives. After the baby was born, the hospital continued to provide us with all the necessary support and care. The staff was extremely attentive and caring, which helped me recover quickly after giving birth. We felt safe and confident knowing that we were in good hands. Staying in the hospital after giving birth gave us time to adapt to the new role of parents, as well as the opportunity to enjoy the first days of our baby's life in a calm and supportive environment. Edward and I were determined to give our child the best we have and raise him in love and care. When it came time to leave the hospital, we felt ready for a new chapter in our lives. Despite all the difficulties and trials we have gone through, we have come out of them stronger and more united than ever. We were grateful for every moment we spent together and for the opportunity to start a new life as a threesome. Like me, and the reason for their divorce was also cheating. Despite the fact that I initially did not want to enter into a new relationship, the interest in my personal life from colleagues made me think. Finally, I decided to give myself a chance and see what could come of it. At the meeting, I met Helen, who turned out to be an extremely sweet and understanding woman. Our first lunch together was surprisingly easy. Helen was smart and sensitive, and she talked about her past with an openness I hadn't expected. It was refreshing, especially after everything I'd been through. We were both cautious because of our previous experiences, but it gave us the opportunity to build our relationship on mutual understanding and respect from the very beginning. With each meeting, trust and attraction grew between us. We talked a lot, shared our dreams and plans for the future. Helen showed me that life can start over at any age, and that past mistakes should not determine our future. After about a year of our meetings, Helen invited me to move in with her. This decision did not come easily, because I valued my independence and space. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became that my heart had already made a choice. I agreed, and moving turned out to be one of the best decisions of my life. Living with Helen has brought me a harmony I haven't experienced in so long. We supported each other in all our endeavors and found pleasure in the daily little things, from morning coffee together to evening walks around the area. Our house quickly became a place full of love and warmth. Our families also accepted our relationship with joy. Helen's children from her previous marriage welcomed me, and we were able to build a strong relationship based on mutual respect and kindness. We have become a real family that supports each other in all circumstances. Time passed, and every year our understanding and love for each other only deepened. I learned to appreciate every moment spent together and realized that true happiness is when you share your life with someone who makes you better. We started training under the guidance of a doctor. Both our parents were surprised and worried, but they were genuinely excited, and therefore it was decided that I would give birth in a well-equipped large hospital. The obstetrician was a very caring and competent doctor, which was encouraging. On one of the days of the prenatal examination, not only the obstetrician, but also the pediatrician joined contact us to discuss all the details of the upcoming delivery and care of the baby after birth. They informed us about all the possible risks associated with late motherhood and suggested a plan that would help minimize potential complications. It was not just ordinary medical care. They approached our situation with special attention and care. At every stage, I felt the support of Edward, who listened carefully to the doctors and asked questions in order to better understand how we can prepare together for the arrival of our child. It was a time when our relationship became even stronger, as we both invested every effort to ensure the safety and health of the expectant mother and child. We also started attending classes for expectant parents, where we learned the basics of newborn care and support methods during childbirth. These were important moments when we met other couples who were expecting a baby and, like us, were preparing for changes in their lives. Sharing experiences and advice with other parents helped us feel less isolated in our experiences. At the same time, we renovated our house, turning one of the rooms into a nursery. Edward enthusiastically took up decorating, choosing colors and furniture that would be not only beautiful, but also safe for the baby. Our parents often came to help, sharing their knowledge and experience, which made this process even more meaningful and joyful. Like all expectant parents, we sometimes felt stressed and anxious, but together we found ways to deal with these feelings. I appreciated every moment we spent together preparing for the arrival of our child. It was a time filled with hopes and dreams for the future. All our fears and doubts receded when we thought that we would soon become parents. It was a new beginning for both of us, and we were ready to welcome our baby with love and open hearts, despite all the difficulties and challenges that could await us. My name is Bella, and here I am, lying in a stark hospital room, struggling not just with my health, but with the heavy weight of my marriage. For the past 2 years since marrying Ronald, I've come to realize that something deeply unsettling has been brewing beneath the veneer of our domestic life. Today, the starkness of my reality couldn't be clearer. My husband, Ronald, stood by my hospital bed with a scowl, his words cutting through the sterile air like a knife. "What's the deal here? This place is filthy," he complained, glancing around my hospital room with disdain. "You're obviously using your illness as a way to slack off on housework. You know how much I like things clean. Normally, you should come home even from the hospital to clean and greet your husband." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Lying here, battling cancer, and all he could think about was how the dust might settle on our home furniture? The absurdity of his complaint was almost laughable, if it weren't so painfully cruel. Ronald had changed, or perhaps, he had always been this way, and I had failed to see it. This man, who I once thought of as my partner, now seemed more like a stranger, a cold and unfeeling creature. The man I call my husband is likely not human. He must be a devil or something, I muttered under my breath, the sting of his words lingering in the air. Our problems began long before my diagnosis. It was as if Ronald had been slowly replaced by someone else after attending his high school reunion a year ago. He came back with grandiose ideas, showing me pictures of a trendy room, talking about unifying furniture colors to emulate the luxurious lifestyle of a successful businessman he had reconnected with. I want to make the room look like this, he declared, pointing to a photo of a lavish, chic apartment that belonged to his friend. The changes he proposed were not just unrealistic, they were suffocating us financially and emotionally. He suggested moving to an apartment that would triple our current rent. How are we going to pay for that? I asked, my voice laden with worry. You're good at budgeting, Bella. We're both working, so we'll figure it out, right? He replied, his tone dismissive, as if the matter was trivial. That night, as I laid in the hospital, the gravity of my situation became painfully clear. My health was in jeopardy, and the man who should have been my rock was instead a source of deep distress. The words he didn't know yet were about to change everything. I'm sorry, but your wife just passed away. These were just the words echoing in my mind, a prelude to the reckoning that awaited Ronald. This narrative, my narrative, is far from over. The reality of our frayed marriage and my fight for health is a testament to the struggles many face, hidden behind the closed doors of outwardly normal lives. As I lay here, contemplating the future, I knew changes were coming. And they were coming soon. I glared at Ronald sternly after his dismissive remark. His face momentarily registered fear and sadness, a stark contrast to the harshness of his earlier words. Wow, calm down. I was just making a light comment. It's a buzzkill when you can't even take a joke, he muttered under his breath, his eyes avoiding mine. But the tension between us told a different story, he was absolutely serious. Our disputes had grown more frequent and intense, and with them, my health began to decline. The onset of frequent stomach pains initially seemed like distress, a physical manifestation of our deteriorating relationship. However, the situation escalated alarmingly when I began experiencing unexplained bleeding that wouldn't stop. Concerned, I visited the nearby hospital, where after several tests, I was diagnosed with uterine cancer. The cold sterility of the doctor's office made me shiver involuntarily as he discussed my condition. Do you plan on having children in the future? He inquired gently. The question struck a deep chord, as preserving my uterus seemed unlikely given my condition. Removal was the best option. I'll discuss it with my husband, I replied, my voice breaking as the reality of losing my uterus and with it, the possibility of ever having children sank in. Driving home, tears streamed down my face. I dreaded Ronald's reaction. He loved kids, and the thought of how this might affect our relationship weighed heavily on my mind. When I got home, Ronald and I sat down for a long, heartfelt discussion. He was deeply shocked by the news, but supportive. We decided that I would take a leave of absence from work to begin my treatment, and ultimately, we chose to proceed with the hysterectomy followed by chemotherapy. On the day of the surgery, Ronald took time off work to accompany me to the hospital. His cheerfulness seemed odd given the gravity of our situation. After enduring an 8-hour surgery, I awoke to the reality that my uterus was gone. The doctor reassured me that we had caught the disease at its lowest stage, which was a small consolation during my hospital stay. During my recovery in the hospital, visits from coworkers, friends, and particularly those with children, filled me with a bittersweet feeling. My father-in-law, Walt, and mother-in-law, Amelia, also visited. Amelia's attempt to offer sympathy was overshadowed by her pressing advice. We understand it's hard for you, Bella, but going forward, please manage the household and finances well, she said, her timing less than ideal. Walt quickly intervened, not now, Amelia. Bella, don't worry about it. Their intentions were unclear, but the distraction was welcome. Ronald's visits were oddly upbeat. "You're going to be surprised when you get out, Bella. Just look forward to it," he kept saying. Although I was curious about the surprise he hinted at, I was just relieved he visited me at all. After some time, the doctors agreed to a temporary discharge from the hospital, allowing me some reprieve and the comfort of being at home for a while. The prospect of returning home brought mixed feelings, but it was a much-needed break from the sterile environment of the hospital. Thrilled to be returning home after the sterile confinement of the hospital, I was eager for the comfort of familiar surroundings. However, my excitement was tempered by the knowledge that I would soon be readmitted for chemotherapy. As Ronald drove me home, he warned with an odd smile, "Don't be shocked when you see the house, okay?" A feeling of unease gripped me, but nothing could have prepared me for what awaited. The moment I stepped through the front door, I was stunned. Our home, once a haven of light and airy spaces accented with soft white tones, had been transformed into something entirely different. It now boasted dark, chic aesthetics, filled with black furniture that replaced my beloved sofa, table, and even the rugs. These new pieces were clearly catered to Ronald's taste, not mine. The appliances, too, were all black, meticulously coordinated to match the new decor. As I stood frozen in shock, Ronald gleefully announced, "Cool, right? I did this all by myself. Oh, and we can exchange the wallpaper back when we leave, so that'll be an extra expense." His enthusiasm felt like a sharp jab to my already fragile state. I suddenly remembered something and rushed to our bedroom, only to find it completely altered as well. "Where's my dresser?" I asked, a sense of panic rising within me. Caught off guard, Ronald stumbled for words. Sorry, I got carried away and, threw it away." I exploded in anger. "Threw it away? Are you kidding me? I've told you how important that dresser is to me, Ronald. Bring it back right now." Every shout intensified the pain from my recent surgeries. Ronald paused before blurting out, dismissively, "Well, what's thrown away is thrown away. Deal with it." So annoying. Then he stormed out. Alone in this unfamiliar space, I sank to the floor, unable to hold back the tears. That dresser was not just furniture, it was a cherished gift from my mom when I first moved out for my job. After my parents divorced in elementary school, I had lived with my mom until she passed away in a car accident not long after I got married. That dresser was irreplaceable to me, and I had told Ronald many times about its sentimental value. Between my hospital stays, life became a living nightmare. I had been looking forward to coming home, but my husband continued to be in a bad mood, barely speaking to me. When he did, his words were sharp and hurtful. "You're home all day, at least do some housework. Look at this dust, are you really okay with this? It's embarrassing for a woman." Exhausted and still in recovery, I responded, "How about you do some things for yourself for once? You only clean what's visible, Ronald. You could at least clean the drain or the toilet." Life at home was becoming as taxing as the illness itself, with my physical and emotional reserves being constantly drained by the new, unwelcoming environment and Ronald's cold indifference. Returning home after the initial rounds of chemotherapy was an ordeal, given Ronald's increasingly passive-aggressive behavior. He deliberately avoided washing my clothes and would flaunt his food in front of me, eating without offering any to me. Exhausted by his childish antics, I turned to friends to help with groceries. On the day of my readmission to the hospital for further treatment, Ronald didn't accompany me. I went alone, a stark reminder of the growing rift between us. The chemotherapy sessions were more grueling than I had imagined. The physical effects were severe, but nothing was as emotionally unsettling as watching my carefully maintained hair begin to fall out. Shortly after my admission, Ronald left for an extended business trip. I had hoped he might call to check on me, but the calls never came. One day, while I was lying weakly in my hospital bed, my mobile phone started ringing repeatedly. Too drained to engage, especially fearing it might be Ronald, I hesitated to pick up. Eventually, the hospital staff, seeing the caller ID and my reluctance, switched the call to speaker. Ronald's voice boomed through the phone, his tone accusatory and harsh. "What the hell is this? The house is a mess. You're obviously just using your illness as an excuse to avoid housework. I like a clean house, you should be welcoming me home by cleaning." The nurse handing me the phone looked as distressed as I felt. But to my surprise and relief, it wasn't me who responded to Ronald's ridiculous outburst. "Unfortunately, your wife has just finished her discharge briefing and is about to handle some paperwork. Could you please not disrupt her with your nonsense?" the nurse replied, her voice calm but firm. Ronald's flustered voice, "If you'd been listening, who do you think you are? You could just clean yourself." The attending doctor, who had overheard the conversation, took the phone from the nurse. "I've been a doctor for many years, and I've never met someone as unreasonable as you. You're annoying," he said before promptly hanging up. After a moment, he turned to me and apologized for his outburst, explaining he had a daughter and the situation got to him emotionally. "Don't worry about it, doctor," I responded, a faint smile crossing my lips. "I plan on divorcing him anyway, so it's no big deal." Upon hearing my response, the doctor smiled, clearly relieved. "Well, that's good to hear." After being discharged from the hospital, I didn't go home. Instead, I headed straight to a particular place to start the process I had decided upon. Not long after, Ronald burst into the room, his face flushed and his demeanor anxious. "Bella, why are you here?" Seeing me, he didn't offer a word of concern, but just stood there, frozen. "It's Bella's discharge day, so we came to pick her up." "Now sit down, Ronald," Amelia, sitting beside me, said coldly. Ronald blinked rapidly, visibly shaken, looking like he was hiding something. His discomfort was evident, and for the first time, I felt a shift in power. As I looked at him, his eyes darting around the room, I knew that the path I was on was the right one, despite the hardships that lay ahead. "Oh, Bella, and us an apology," Amelia insisted, her voice firm yet filled with a surprising warmth that hadn't been there before. Ronald, however, remained silent, his face unreadable, his lips pressed tightly together. "Ronald, you asked us for financial help, claiming that Bella was overspending. Isn't that all a lie?" Walt's furious voice echoed throughout the room, breaking the tense silence that had fallen over us. It was a shocking revelation. Ronald had been lying, and it was a nasty lie at that. During my second hospital stay, Walt and Amelia had approached me with concern. "Bella, we know it's not the best time, but we're not exactly flush with cash either. We hope this will be the last time we have to lend you money," Amelia had said, her expression troubled. Confused, I had looked at them, completely unaware of what they were talking about. It was then we realized, for the first time, that Ronald had been outrageously lying to them. It turned out Ronald had been getting financial help from Walt and Amelia by claiming my supposed overspending was straining our budget. Feeling emboldened, he had approached them for money several times. "If it's hard for you to say, I can talk to Bella about it," Amelia had offered, but Ronald flatly refused, spinning his web of deceit. Naturally, his story was pure fabrication, and even Walt and Amelia had grown suspicious of Ronald, who kept asking for money while I was hospitalized. Then he apparently pleaded for help again, claiming my hospital bills were astronomical. Upon hearing this, I instantly knew where the money was going. "Once you step into our home, you'll quickly see what Ronald spent the money on," I told Walt and Amelia, handing them the house key. As expected, they came back to the hospital room with astonished looks on their faces. "What's up with that room? How much did it cost to change it like that?" they asked. I didn't hold back when I told them that Ronald had acted on his own without consulting me. I explained about the terrible treatment I received during my temporary discharge from the hospital and stated my intention to end our married life and proceed with a divorce. The most frustrating part, I revealed, was how he threw away the dresser my mom had bought for me. "I'm not coming back," I affirmed. Amelia grabbed my hand, her eyes filled with tears. "The dresser he threw away? The dresser from your mom? Ronald will pay for this," she declared, her voice thick with emotion. In fact, Amelia and I had an awkward start, but during a visit to her family home, I had admired a beautiful chest. "It's lovely," I had commented. Amelia beamed. "Actually, this chest was passed down from my grandmother to Mom, and from Mom to me." When I told her about my cherished dresser, a bond formed between us, strengthened by our shared appreciation for family heirlooms and the sentimental value they held. This connection now seemed to draw us even closer in the face of the turmoil caused by Ronald's deceit and insensitivity. Amelia's gesture of offering me the family chest resonated deeply with me, especially after my conversation with Ronald. "Didn't you plan to use our joint savings for it, but couldn't because it's in my name, so you had to borrow from your parents?" My accusations were spot on, leaving Ronald speechless, his face turning a bright red. We had a dual income arrangement where living expenses went into an account in Ronald's name, while savings, primarily intended for our future child, were in my account. When I was diagnosed with cancer, Ronald seemed to think, "We can't have kids anyway, might as well use that money for whatever I want." This realization broke my heart further. "Can't you see how much I've cherished Bella? How can you even talk about divorce?" "This is unfair," Ronald sobbed, looking utterly defeated. Amelia, sitting next to me, chimed in, her voice steady yet filled with disappointment. "Someone who really cares wouldn't say such awful things. It's no big deal if the house gets dusty when no one's there. Walt and I were right there when you made that ridiculous call to the hospital. We were so disappointed we could cry." Walt's face was flushed with anger as he stared down at Ronald. It was a relief to have such reasonable people on my side, supporting me through not just the emotional turmoil of a failing marriage, but also the physical and emotional toll of my treatments. "Ronald, you don't even seem to care about my well-being, let alone my hair loss and frail body. All you care about is saving your own skin. That's why this isn't working. I've supported you, Ronald, but who's going to support me?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion. Ronald lowered his gaze and said nothing more. After that, we finalized our divorce. Thanks to Walt and Amelia's intervention, Ronald wasn't pleased, but the division of assets went largely in my favor. Reluctantly, Ronald repaid the $10,000 he had borrowed from Walt and Amelia. I was shocked to learn how much he had taken without my knowledge. It turns out Ronald couldn't afford to keep the apartment we had been so particular about, and he had to move out. The floors were scratched from dragging furniture, and there were even holes in the walls, signs of a hasty and careless exit. Even worse, the realization of how much had been hidden from me dawned clearer with each passing moment, confirming that my decision to end the marriage was justified. After Ronald moved out, he tried to claim that the damages to the apartment, the scratched floors and holes in the walls, along with the unauthorized wallpaper replacement, were already there when we moved in. However, his assertions quickly crumbled when the management company requested proof from the move-in condition. Fortunately, I had taken photos when we first moved in, which I provided to the management. This evidence left Ronald with no choice but to incur some repair costs, albeit not a huge sum, but still more than he could afford. He asked Walt and Amelia for help, but after everything that had happened, they disowned him and kicked him out. Amelia later told me he was now living in a cheap apartment, struggling with debt. Ronald should have just made do with what he had instead of always living beyond his means. I heard through a friend who works at the same company as my ex-husband that his reputation had taken a nosedive. He's now viewed, particularly by the female staff, as the creep who tormented his sick wife. It's something that he brought upon himself, and something he'll likely regret for the rest of his life. As for me, I'm savoring living alone again. After the ordeal of the past years, I've been keeping a close eye on my health and plan to return to work once I feel more stable physically. My boss has been incredibly understanding, encouraging me to take it at my own pace, for which I am immensely grateful. I still catch up with Walt and Amelia from time to time. They have truly been my support through this tumultuous period. During one of our phone chats, Amelia joyously mentioned how great it was that Mom's dresser came back to me. I had moved recently, taking some items I no longer needed to a thrift shop. While the items were being appraised, I froze in disbelief. There it was, the dresser my mom had given me. It didn't matter whether someone had found it in the dump and brought it in. To me, it was priceless. No other dresser could replace the sentimental value it held for me. A few days later, the dresser, now cleaned up a bit, arrived at my new place. Tucked away in the back corner, in small letters, were the words, "Bella, never give up," penned by my late mother. Life indeed has its ups and downs, but remembering my mom's words has kept me pushing through. And that's not going to change. I'm all set to live my new life.